It was a crisp morning in Oldenburg, Germany, a town that once stood as a beacon of trust and reliability in the healthcare system. But in the very heart of its medical community, the unthinkable was happening. Niels Högel, a nurse known for his friendly smile and dependable nature, had earned the respect of his colleagues, the trust of his patients, and the affection of his superiors. But beneath that facade was a man harboring a dark, horrific secret. One that would tear apart the fabric of the community and shake the very foundations of trust that hospitals and medical professionals are built upon. For years, Niels worked as a nurse in the intensive care unit of 2 major hospitals in Germany. He was praised for his professionalism, his calm demeanor, and his commitment to the care of his patients. But behind closed doors, Högel was committing an act so heinous, so unimaginable, that it would take years for anyone to uncover the truth. He was systematically murdering his patients. What makes a trusted healthcare worker turn into a killer? This is not just a story of a murderer. It's a story of how trust, responsibility, and power can be twisted into something monstrous. Keep reading as we unravel the shocking details of Niels Högel's horrifying reign. The first whispers of suspicion began innocently enough. A patient, whose surgery had gone well, suddenly took a turn for the worse under Högel's care. Another died unexpectedly, and then another. But it wasn't until a particularly disturbing case that the truth began to emerge. A patient who had been recovering well from a routine procedure collapsed suddenly under Högel's watch. The cause? Cardiac arrest. The response? Confusion. There was no clear explanation. The patient had been stable, seemingly healthy, but there was something eerily familiar in the rapidity of the decline. More deaths followed, each one leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. It wasn't just the deaths themselves that raised suspicion. It was the uncanny consistency. The patients who died were all under Högel's care. It was a fact that no one dared to speak aloud. But the hospital administration couldn't ignore the rising death toll, and the quiet murmurs among staff grew louder. Then came the breaking point. A colleague who had been working with Högel noticed something strange. Each of the deaths had occurred on his shifts. The realization hit like a ton of bricks. Could the nurse, who had been trusted with lives, actually be taking them? The investigation began, but at first there was nothing concrete. No physical evidence, no direct witness to the crimes. Just a suspicion, a gut feeling that something was terribly wrong. As the investigation unfolded, the team dug deeper. Medical records were painstakingly reviewed and toxicology reports were examined. What they found was nothing short of horrifying. Each patient who died had been given a lethal dose of a drug. One that could cause a heart attack or severe cardiac arrhythmia. The drug was one that Högel had access to, one that he administered regularly as part of his duties, but he had used it not to heal, but to kill. The more they uncovered, the more chilling the reality became. The deaths weren't isolated accidents. They were part of a pattern, one that had been in place for years. Högel's arrest was just the beginning of a nightmare that would unfold for his victims' families, the survivors who had trusted him, and the medical community as a whole. The trial would reveal a truth so dark, so unfathomable, that it would leave scars that would never fully heal. The victims' families were devastated. For years, they had entrusted the care of their loved ones to professionals who were supposed to protect and heal. They had trusted hospitals and nurses to safeguard their health. But in the case of Högel, that trust had been betrayed in the most devastating way. Each family's grief was unique, but it was shared in its intensity. They had been robbed of their loved ones without warning, without cause, and without any chance to fight back. Many spoke of how they had believed the deaths were nothing more than unfortunate medical accidents. They had no reason to suspect foul play, until the truth came crashing down. The trauma extended beyond the families of the victims. For the medical professionals who had worked alongside Högel, the revelation was a gut punch. Nurses, doctors, and administrators who had known him for years struggled to reconcile the person they had worked with every day with the monster that was now exposed. Some were left questioning their own roles in the deaths that had occurred under their watch. Could they have done something sooner? Could they have seen the signs? The burden of that guilt weighed heavily on everyone involved. As Niels Högel sat in court, the families of his victims were forced to confront the man who had destroyed their lives. Many described the trial as a form of closure, but it was clear that no sentence, no verdict, could bring back what they had lost. They spoke of their loved ones, mothers, fathers, daughters, and sons, who had been stolen from them in the most heart-wrenching way possible. But they also spoke of their anger, their fury at the betrayal they had suffered. How could a man whose job it was to save lives turn so cold, so detached, and commit such unspeakable acts? Högel's own testimony in court offered little explanation. He didn't express remorse or regret for his actions. Instead, he spoke of his need to feel important, his desire for attention. He acknowledged that he had taken lives, but he didn't seem to understand the full extent of the damage he had caused. His coldness, his refusal to take responsibility, only deepened the emotional wound for the families of the victims. They had hoped for answers, for some sign of humanity, but what they received was a man who had stripped away all semblance of empathy. As the trial reached its conclusion, the question remained: why did Högel kill? What drove a man who had dedicated his life to healing to betray the very oath he had sworn to uphold? Stay with us as we delve deeper into the mind of a killer and explore the twisted motivations behind his actions, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. The psychological analysis of Niels Högel revealed a man whose need for control and recognition had become pathological. Psychologists speculated that his desire to inject patients with lethal doses of drugs was not simply about causing harm, but about exerting power over life and death. His actions were not random, they were calculated, deliberate, and cold. He didn't need to confront his victims face to face. He could simply stand back and watch, knowing that his actions were leading to a final, irreversible conclusion. But there was another layer to this. Högel's desire for control extended beyond his patients. He craved attention from his colleagues, from the doctors and nurses who worked with him. His interventions, his miracle saves, were often noted with awe, but the truth behind those miracles was far darker. Högel was addicted to the feeling of power, of controlling life and death in a way that no one else could. The case also highlighted a profound lesson: how easily trust can be abused. The hospital system had relied on oversight, on procedures and checks, but those systems had failed to prevent one of their own from turning into a killer. The very institutions that were meant to protect life had been manipulated, and the consequences were tragic. Högel's case served as a stark reminder that systems, no matter how well-intentioned, are only as strong as the individuals who operate within them. The legacy of Niels Högel's crimes extends beyond his conviction. It's a call to action for all of us. What can we do to protect those we love? How can we ensure that something like this never happens again? Share this story to raise awareness and push for reforms in healthcare to prevent such atrocities. And subscribe to the channel for more intriguing stories. In the end, Niels Högel was sentenced to life in prison. But for the families of his victims, no punishment could ever truly atone for the loss they had suffered. The grief, the questions, the haunting images of loved ones slipping away under the care of someone who should have been their protector. These things would never disappear. And for the medical community, Högel's story was a painful, brutal reminder that vigilance, integrity, and accountability are paramount. His legacy is a somber one, reminding us that even in the places where life should be cherished, evil can still take root. The lessons learned from Niels Högel's horrific crimes are clear. We must never take trust for granted. Whether it's in healthcare, in our communities, or in our personal relationships, trust is sacred, and when it is broken, the consequences can be devastating. His story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths, but in doing so, it reminds us of the importance of accountability, of oversight, and of ensuring that the systems we rely on are always functioning in the best interest of those they are meant to protect.